Hell yeah. Hello everyone, this is Jose Herrera with the O3XX series. Today's special guest is Alex West, retired Navy SEAL, founder, and director of One More Wave. A little bit about Alex. Alex was born in South Africa and moved to Kansas City when he was 10 years old. He spent 20 years and conducted 15 combat deployments in the SEAL teams, retiring in 2018. He is the founder and managing director of the veteran surfing nonprofit known as One More Wave. Currently, he is in his second year of graduate school at Pepperdine University, intending to become a licensed professional counselor. He hopes to impact the veteran and first responder mental health space in our country.
So, sounds good.
All right, I am good on my end, Polly.
All right, good to go.
Hey, Alex, I apologize, man, if my internet goes out. I don't know what it is, but I got like bad mojo in this part of the United States.
I hear you. No worries.
So no, just to pick up where we were, I was sharing with some of my colleagues regarding some of Frances Haugen's claims regarding Facebook. You know, the thing is that we already knew this. You know, the cybersecurity firms like Blackbird AI have been kind of putting this information out there. And of course, if you don't have the time of the day to sit down and look through these analytics, look through these assessments, you're not going to really know what's taking place. And I think that at some level, we might recognize, yeah, this is, impacting mental health, but there's a kind of like a mechanical process that we're not really looking into. And that's kind of, so I was like looking back at or hearing some of your conversations, I think with the Bulletproof Veteran podcast, you and Rob were talking about some of like the fight or flight response. Well, some of like the diagrams that I share with some of my colleagues is like, smartphone devices are what create what they call affective states, mental states. And so artificial traumas are generated from your smartphone devices as a result of whether it's weaponized memes or narratives, right? So it's like automatically wherever you go with a smartphone device or wherever there's a laptop or another smartphone device, these atmospheres, either one, they follow you or are already established and they're permeating. So you're constantly in fight or flight. The HPA axis is constantly activated. So over time, there's going to be this epigenetic impact. So we know that high levels of cortisol, high levels of adrenaline begin to shrink the gray matter in your brain. And it takes out the prefrontal cortex and it impacts the executive decision-making process. So one of my projects that I'm trying to do is trying to marry over influence operations within the mental health paradigm to begin to at least come up with adaptive therapies that do kind of go hand in hand with health and mental wellness. And I feel that if we don't do this by the time 5G, 6G, 7G are in place, the next generation is going to have an epigenetic predisposition. It's going to be way more docile. It's going to be way more sporadic. And as you know, we have an aging population and youth bulges are a target for influence operations campaigns all across the globe. We have an aging population. So the average age of an American is 39. And that's really bad because one, the workforce is not going to be able to refill the way it has been, and a younger workforce allows for a kind of prosperity to take place. To serve sector positions like military service, law enforcement, first responder type stuff, those positions aren't going to be filled, and they're becoming way more demanding as a result of the social political things taking place. And then more importantly, higher institutions are going to falter as a result of these uh, these predispositions. And I was sharing with Polly, and I'll shut up after this point. But there's 51.5 million Americans that have what they call AMI. That's any mental illness, and that number is increasing yearly. And so I firmly believe that that is the target audience. I believe that's where the future of war is taking place, in the cognitive space. And if we can undermine the cognitive space, then other nation states in great power competition have a huge advantage over us. So like the impacts of mental health, extend farther than what we're assessing currently right now. And that's kind of been like the mission with this podcast, the book that I'm writing. And I try to do whatever I can to kind of like blurt that out every chance that I get, because we can't escape the ecosystem, we can't escape technology. And it's things like one more wave, right? The ability to have art therapy, the ability to have surfing therapy that can take us into that state of mind where we're no longer dependent upon the dopaminergic hits that are coming from smartphone devices or technologies. And so the work that you're doing is huge. It's really, really huge. And all the respect to you, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Do you want to kind of get into that? I mean,
Sure.
as far as your organization and what you guys are, what your mission is and what you're trying to do for veterans, or
Yeah, no, thank you, Polly. Yeah, so I run a nonprofit called One More Wave. What we do is we make customized surfboards for wounded or injured veterans, customized to their injuries. So think amputees, burn victims, spinal cord injuries, and also mental health, PTSD, major depressive disorder, general anxiety disorder, things like that. And we also build community. So we have three main chapters, one in Oahu, our flagship in San Diego, and one in North Carolina. And what we do with those chapters is essentially just that. We're talking a little bit prior to the show on Sebastian Junger's Tribe, the book, which if any listener hasn't read it, I would highly recommend it. Essentially, though, we provide that, try to provide that tribe. And within that veteran tribe, we are hoping to, impact their mental health and their lifestyle. So that's, in a nutshell, an elevator pitch, I suppose, of what it is that we do.
yeah, that's awesome, dude. So I got a question about that. Like, and I'm sure it's been happening, long before you picked this up, but as far as like making a surfboard or a device that will help a veteran with like multiple amputees, or like, do you guys design these? It's like you look at the veteran in their particular circumstance and you're like, okay, how can we make something that will work for him or her, and and kind of get them out there and get them able to use it and enjoy it?
That's a great question, Paulie. Not only do we design them, but we're leading in research and development for amputees. We're a leading surfboard design. We have more designs than anywhere else in the world. So a lot of places look to us for what we're doing with our surfboards, because in my mind, there's a lot of great surfing nonprofits out there that will get a veteran on a board, push them into some what's called whitewater, just some like easy type waves, and then do a high five and be like, right on, we did our mission, which is true. They did. And that's incredible. And that's a great starting place. But in my mind, what's missing is the performance. And you take a veteran who has, let's say, lost a leg when they're 22 years old, and their whole life they've thought of themselves as an athlete. I'm not saying a professional athlete, I just mean an active person. And now all of a sudden you're telling them, like, just get in some really easy waves, put some like kid gloves on, push them into an easy wave and be like, mission accomplished. Well, that just doesn't cut it, right? Because that doesn't move the needle, in my opinion. In the beginning, maybe, where they've never surfed, but where if you've ever skied before, or you start out the bunny slope, then you get to the, where it's like pizza sliced French fries, you're getting easily down the hill, and then you progress into the green hill, and then the blue, and then the black. And that's where that passion can be tapped is within those progressions from, let's say, the green hill to the blue hill. And if you're not getting that, then you're missing the picture. You're missing who that veteran is, because they're a person who wants to actually get out there and push themselves safely, of course. But that's where we're at. Kind of went down a little bit of rabbit hole, but on the boards, we'll meet with, let's say it is an amputee. We'll meet with them. We have several boards that we call our quote unquote demo boards. Essentially, they're boards that we've had veterans with similar injuries, and we'll study them. We'll take our shapers out, we'll take some video, and we'll actually study how they're surfing, and we'll take into account how they're surfing with their, let's say, prosthetic, also the location that they're surfing. Waves are different in, let's say, San Diego than they are in North Carolina versus maybe, Hawaii. So we'll take that all into account to make an adaptive surfboard for that veteran.
Wow, that's awesome. I kind of was reading a little bit, and I got into, what pushed you to start this. And I thought that story was pretty amazing about, the Marine that you were with, and you were out there with them. And I kind of want you to maybe expand on that a little bit, but as far as how it impacted him, I'm sure a lot of these individuals that go through a traumatic experience like that, and then kind of, just get pushed away to the side at home to recover, or deal with their, you being able to get them out there. And, the words that he said to you, as far as like, no one's watching, no one's looking at me. Like, that has to be life-changing.
It was, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you want to kind of go into that?
Yeah.
What pushed you into starting?
Sure. Yeah. After, I was in the military also. And after my second helicopter crash in Afghanistan, I was in a traumatic brain injury clinic at Bethesda Naval Hospital called the National Intrepid Center of Excellence. Incredible program. But when I was there, I had a decision where I'd go back and deploy again, or maybe take some time on shore duty. For people who aren't aware, in the, Marine Corps or the Navy, they call it shore duty, where you're not deployable. You're just at a training command. Anyway, so I moved from Virginia Beach to San Diego. And while I was there, I was struggling with a lot of mental health. And my psychiatrist said, hey, there's this great program at Balboa Hospital called the Health and Wellness Department. And they do a surf project, or the surf program. And what they do is they take a lot of amputees and injured active duty service members out surfing. You should volunteer for it. That might give you some purpose. Because I'd been in Virginia Beach for about 11 years. I didn't really know too many people in San Diego. So I kind of needed my own, even within the military tribe. And so I went and I started volunteering, and it was incredible. And I just got so much, so much purpose out of helping a lot of these veterans or active duty service members surf. And I just started thinking, wow, a lot of these boards aren't adapted to these veterans that are these guys that are missing a limb. And so I thought to myself, I should do something. But then, I was active duty at the time. As I mentioned, I was struggling with mental health. There's all sorts of things going on. And then about a year into it of volunteering, I was with a Marine who was about 25 years old. He was missing his leg below the knee from Afghanistan. And it's a beautiful Southern California morning. And we're out there and he's smiling. I just look at him thinking to myself, he's smiling because it's beautiful out. And so I was like, yeah, man, it's beautiful out, huh? And he just looked at me and said, yeah, Alex, it is beautiful out, but that's not why I'm smiling. I'm smiling because when I'm out in the water with everyone else, nobody's staring at me as the guy missing a leg. And when I catch a wave, in that moment, there's no more pain. And that was my aha moment. I was like, fuck it. I got to do something about this. So I started driving home, and I swung by a Borders bookstore, which was still around back then. I think there might be a couple left, but I walked in and there was a nonprofit section, and I was just I was all motivated, and I started looking at these incredible books from all these, these incredible nonprofits that are just truly shaping the world, or professors at the highest level of institutions, all these incredible people. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm losing, like my motivation meter just tanked. And then out of the corner of my eye, I saw this little yellow book. And I just thought to myself, there's no way. I pulled it out, and it was How to Start a Nonprofit for Dummies. And I just thought, I'm not leaving empty handed. I will do this. And so I bought the book, went home with a cup of coffee and a highlighter. And that was the beginning of One More Wave back in 2015.
Wow. So that's awesome, man. So have you always been into surfing? Like, did you know how to surf before the program, or?
So I did not surf until I joined the Navy. And when I was in the Navy, one of my best buddies and roommates was a big surfer. And he was always just dragging me out, like, let's go. And in the beginning, I'm like, I don't know how to do it, and he's like, I'll teach you. And so he did. And which was huge for me, because every time we came back from our deployments, we would go on surf trips, or we would surf. And I knew there's something special about it, because if we came back and I was on edge, let's say my anxiety was out of control, sleep was all over the place, and just dealing with that deployment, I always knew I felt better coming out of the water than when I went in, and that there was something special about it. So it's almost like the groundwork was being laid while I was, for one more wave, while I was still, deploying. But to answer your question, I didn't. I would, if you would have asked me before I joined the military, like, you would create a surfing nonprofit. I would think there's no way.
Right.
I've never, are you sure? So yeah, it's almost surprising to me as anybody. I don't know.
For sure. Well, yeah, you during your time in service, you kind of spent quite a bit of your time around the water. So do you want to kind of go into that and what you did, how you served our country? And
Sure. Yeah, I did. So I joined the Navy in 1998 to be a SEAL, and I did that. And I retired in 2018 after 20 years. I was based on the East Coast, or the West Coast first in San Diego, then on an East Coast team in Virginia Beach. And then, as I mentioned, I finished my time out in kind of a schoolhouse on the West Coast. I did 15 combat deployments to Iraq or Afghanistan. Those deployments, though, for a lot of the veterans listening, they weren't like year long, right? They were 3 or 4 months. So that's just kind of, let's set that straight, because I know people are doing the math in their head. They're like, this guy's full of shit. so it was about like 3 or 4 months per deployment. And it was just a grind. I deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan. I was deployed to one of them every single year, at least one time, from 2001, from the Afghan invasion, all the way up until 2013. And I served with, incredible guys and gals. And I feel just fortunate to have done those deployments with them. I'm humbled to this day.
Awesome, man. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. How did, what were some of the things that you did early on? I mean, like recovering in the hospital. I mean, thank God, that never happened to us, falling out of the sky. Some of the stuff that I was worried about. But what was kind of like some of the things you did in terms of like recovery for that?
Sure. It's been a long go, to be honest with you. And it has been, what I'd really stress is a daily practice. And I was fortunate enough to recently be on a podcast with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote this book, The Body Keeps the Score. And if any listener hasn't read it, I would highly recommend it. But one thing that really struck me that he said was, while you're in the military and you're putting all your time and effort into being, let's say, the best Marine, the best helicopter pilot, the best SEAL, whatever you want to call it, whatever your job is, if you put that type of effort into it to be the best, that is the same amount of effort that you're going to have to put into your own mental health in order to pull yourself out of the dregs of the deepest sorrow, the deepest, darkest places. And I really thought, I was like, wow, I guess in a way I have sort of been doing that, but I could be doing more. Of course, you can always do more. But to answer your question, that it started at NICO, at that traumatic brain injury clinic. And I suppose with that, I started getting into, meditation, alpha stim. There was some psychotropic, some psych meds that I had to get on in the beginning. And that was the beginning, but I could talk a lot about what's happened since, but that was the beginning stages of just reset. Hey, you need to start changing the way you approach your life. And also, most importantly, was quitting drinking, because, a ton of veterans, and it goes all the way back to Homer, that like the veterans have always drank to suppress to numb their pain or to numb their experience. And that is a cultural thing that I believe in. I'm not trying to be on my high horse of like, everybody needs to stop drinking. I just mean that if you're drinking and you're struggling with mental health, you are not setting yourself up for success. At least that was my story.
No, I get that. I've heard a lot of great things about the alpha stem. In regard to the drinking, so I got into, I know like you talked about like art therapy and stuff like that in some of your previous interviews. I was doing creative writing, like writing as a form of like therapy.
Good.
and it was doing great. Like it was doing wonders for me. The downside of it was every time I'd come up and start writing, I'd start downing whiskey,
Mhm.
and I was like, I'm getting all the necessary components from it, but it's the drinking that was like setting me up for failure. And so like I'd have like these cathartic moments, writing, crying, but part of it was I was halfway through a bottle, and there I am,
Sure.
releasing, and then I'd wake up in the next day feeling like crap, when I could have done the same thing, but I didn't have those skill sets then. Those were kind of learned. My mentor, Mark Mosier, who I talk about all the time, he did 3 decades in the Marine Corps, force recon background. He's also like an avid water guy. Actually, one of the first events that we did was a canoeing event with some Wounded Warrior guys. And this is the first time I canoed, and I was like, shit, man, like I can't do this. Like I was like turning the canoe left and right. And yeah.
Awesome.
And yeah, well, you're a Marine, right? So it's like, oh, Marine water. No, totally sucked at it. No, but it was him who kind of like guided me those early years, to put in more work into my body and into my mind. And yeah, man, mental health is hard work. It's like another job.
Yes.
It's so crazy to think that taking a shower, getting a haircut, putting on some clothes, taking a step outside the doorway is such a big deal for some people. And
Mhm.
that kind of was like my story. I was like a hermit for like 4 years of my life.
Mhm.
And, thank God, I broke through it, but it wasn't easy at all
Right.
whatsoever.
I think that's an important, that's an important point. That's, like kind of hermiting or, kind of going dark that, I did that also. And for listeners out there too, to think like, hey, you're first off, you're not alone. Second off, you're listening to this for guys that have been through it and it can be done. But most importantly, it's okay. Like for you, even drinking, you can't be ashamed from that. That's just your national or your natural ability to like want to try to cope with what you were doing. And so it's I would say for the listeners out there too, it's like, hey, first off, it's like just make it to the next meal. You know what I mean? Like just try to, even like you said, like just try to get out the door. And then if you get out the door, that's a big win for today. And then maybe tomorrow, you go to the grocery store, maybe not at its most packed time, but maybe in the evening, and then after a long period of time, you can really start to pull yourself out of that. But it is a daily practice. And a lot of veterans, a lot of friends I have think that it's like a one-stop shop. Like there's a magic pill, like maybe it's in psychedelic therapy, and we can go into that if you guys like, but or whatever it might be. It's like if I do this, I don't change my behaviors or my thought processes of how I'm, acting in life, like you'll go right back to where you're at because you haven't changed those maladaptive behaviors. You haven't changed those thought processes, all these different things. So it's but not to get discouraged, but it can start with, it's a small step, just try to get a win. That's all you gotta do is get on the board.
Small victories. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Oh, you mentioned psychedelics.
Mhm.
Are
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's kind of a big thing right now with a lot of, emerging mental health treatment is through psychedelics, whether it's through ketamine, psilocybin, ibogaine. There's, MDMA. There's all sorts of different stuff out there. But I recently actually wrote, I'm in grad school right now to actually become a therapist, psychotherapist. And I wrote a paper on ketamine treatment, and I was for treatment resistant depression. And for the listeners that don't know, treatment resistant depression is essentially depression that you've taken two separate attempts at two different psych medications to try to get out of depression, and also through therapy. And it's just not working, which accounts for about 50% of people who are diagnosed with major depressive disorder. So it's a lot. And ketamine is actually showing some great efficacy, and it's legal. It just was legalized in 2019 to treat depression. Anyway, there is, with all of that, I personally have benefited from psychedelic therapy, ibogaine specifically. But the big thing to remember with that is you have to do work beforehand and you have to do work after, because even within this psychedelic therapy, if you come out of that, you come out of it with what's called the honeymoon phase. So for maybe 6 to 8 weeks after the experience, it's like lollipops and gumdrops. Totally resets you, especially if you've been struggling and you've been in the dark forever, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, like life is great. Well, the thing is, you have to go, getting back to your behaviors and thought processes. If you're not working with a therapist or a coach, or maybe a group of veterans friends that are supportive, if you're not doing that, changing, then you're going to fall right back into the same trap of, I'm drinking too much, or I'm fighting with my wife, or I'm, just pissed off at, road rage, all of these different things. If you're not working to try to change it, and I don't mean like it's going to change overnight, but just working to try to change it, is if you're not doing that, you're going to fall right back in the same spot you were. So it's not a magic pill, but it can be an effective tool.
No, yeah, totally. I've dabbled with that. Went through a process with someone who was a licensed professional, and they kind of guided me. And for like 3 months, man, it was great. Like I was doing the work. I was way more productive, way more focused. And I kind of took a break from it just to, because I like to wean off of stuff like that. But it's basically microdosing, psilocybin mushroom.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I recently kind of, got back on it. And I think like the thing for me with it is that it makes me such a productive person. Not that I ever wasn't, but it just makes me way more focused, that I get like too many projects going on. And then like my family's like, yo, like, where you at? Like, you need to focus here in the present with us, not just your projects or your other work. So no, I totally 100% back that up. Like it has done some amazing things. And me and Polly have an hermano who's in Marsoc, and they were sharing with us some of the well, he was sharing with me a while back at a little gathering that we had, of how they were implementing ketamine in Camp Lejeune for people who were either in crisis or suicidal. And it blew me back, because I the Marine Corps of all places was tapping into that. I would have thought that they would have been way more stricter, stringent with like those types of things. So oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. It doesn't surprise me, because they can't, the science is there, and it's emerging, albeit, but it is there. So if you're a physician and, you're not reading these peer reviewed journals and these studies that are going on that are, peer reviewed, it's just the data is there. And so I'm happy to hear they are doing that at Camp Lejeune. They're also doing a lot of crazy. I read a study recently with MDMA, I think at Fort Campbell, where they gave it, got a lot out of that too. So if the military is doing it and you're a veteran and you're not sure where to go, you can probably find something similar within your town that you live in. It's there. I going back to your experience with microdosing, that I've also gotten a lot out of that as well. And if listeners don't know, there's a formula or a protocol called the Stamets stack, which is by Paul Stamets. Essentially, you do a little bit of psilocybin, and then you do lion's mane mushroom also, which has been beneficial for brain health, and then also niacin for a flush. That's just kind of the standard thing to do. There's a lot of different ways. Everybody's got an opinion. You run into any hippie, they've got 12 different ideas, I'm sure. but as combat hippies, which I think we might all be at heart, it is very effective. And that might be something to look at. However, I would really caution anyone, just remember, going back to that, it is not a magic pill. So just because you can't just be like, oh, I'm struggling, I'm going to start doing some psychedelics. It's, that is a tool. But in my opinion, the center of gravity for your therapy should revolve around a talk therapy with a therapist who's who doesn't balk at the idea. You're like, I'm thinking about doing some ibogaine, and they might be like, okay, I don't approve of that. Now, you could probably find some that are, but most importantly, getting that unbiased, like unbiased opinion on what you should do and advice from a therapist is huge. Where a lot of us, just want to just talk to other vets all the time, which is great. But I am a big proponent of talk therapy as like the center of gravity, and then everything else augments it. Because at the end of the day, when everything goes to shit, you can always get a therapy session in and get hopefully reset. That's just my 2 cents, but I'll get off my soapbox for a second on that.
No, I mean, I think you're hitting it right on with that. The problem that we see a lot of is getting guys that are maybe in those holes, actually coming out, because I think it does take a certain, personal characteristic or trait to do some self-analyzing, be like, okay, I'm lacking here. What's going on? What do I need to do? And then take the steps. A lot of guys do not possess that, and that's where your tribe comes in, keeping in touch with guys and realizing, hey man, this guy, I'm talking to him a lot, but he's always hammered when he calls me,
Yeah.
or we've all been through that. And that's just one way to cope with it. Not the healthiest way, but I think that's where we as a community need to step in and be like, hey dude, you want to try this, or what's going on with you? And I know, I don't know how it was in the SEALs with you guys in your community, as far as, not wanting to, I'm sure none of you wanted to be the weak link, and, your ailments and problems just got pushed aside because you're so team focused that, that kind of transitions out of the military with you. And then you're by yourself and there's no one around to look at you. I'm sure you had team members that they knew something was off with you, even if you didn't say anything, just because they knew you so well and they knew how you performed. They could be like, hey Alex, what's going on, man? Like, you need to go
Yeah.
see doc or whatnot. Like,
Sure.
your ankle bugging you, you're gimping a little bit,
Yeah.
but once you leave, you don't have that. And that's kind of where we need to bridge that gap as far as getting guys help. Like, so yeah, I don't know. Habits and habit forming behaviors are some, I was doing a little bit of reading about that. It's like a drug addiction. It's some of the hardest things to change in yourself. But number one is realizing there's an issue, or realizing you don't need to be living the way you are and doing the things that change it. But
I think you brought up a good point, Paulie. In my opinion, I think this path to recovery, quote unquote, maybe it is mile marker one. If it might be, you're just there for your friend, right? You're just there, like, even if he's drunk and he's calling you up, and it's most importantly, you just pick up. And maybe, you don't talk too much. You just hear him. He just knows that you're there. And then maybe it will take by, mile marker 10 for you to actually have the wherewithal to actually seek out professional help. But there's nothing wrong with, in that beginning stages, like, that is probably the most effective way to help a guy who is struggling with mental health to not sit on his couch with a handle of Jack Daniels and playing with his pistol. Could just be that you're just there. You haven't talked to somebody in years, and you see that number pop up. You're like, I should answer that. Even if I know, we were in the Marine Corps together. We were in the SEAL teams, whatever. We were in the military together. Why is he calling me out of the blue? Like, if I have to, I'll step aside and just, even if I have to tell the guy, like, can I call you back in an hour? It's just so important, because that is such a crucial time. And I think that's, you bring up a really great point. I think that is true. At the end of the day, it's that tribe, that community. I mean, I belong to I go to a VA group for PTSD here in the Nashville area. And when Afghanistan fell, right off the bat, it's filled with Vietnam vets, just chock full of Vietnam vets, a couple of Gulf War guys. But right off the bat, all of these Vietnam vets were just hitting me up, phone calls, text messages, checking in. Hey, it's just like the fall of Saigon. How can I, like, you want to go to lunch? Do you want to do this or that? And I was so, like, it almost brought a tear to, actually, it did bring a tear to my eye, because I'm like, wow, these guys who are my dad's age, my dad was also a Vietnam vet, they're reaching out and they're just like, how can I help you? And these guys are in their mid 70s. And here they are trying to help someone else. And I think that is such an important thing for that community. And going back to, it might just be just taking a phone call from someone who needs it, or reaching out to someone if you heard that through the grapevine that they're not doing well. Even a text, just like, hey, what's up, man? I was just thinking of you. Hope you're well.
yeah, absolutely. I was talking to a guy the other day, a guy from our unit, and I was telling him, a lot of us just sit there and we all go, bring it back to going through that phase where you just get so reclusive, you don't know what to do. You're like, I'm just going to shut myself in my house and not do anything, or just keep to myself for years until I break through this. And, you're talking about, like, so many of us went through situations together or similar circumstances across our time in service. It's like, we're not stupid, right? Why would we sit there and think I'm the only one that's feeling this way?
Right.
Well, for some reason we do. Like, and I know it ties back to not wanting to be the problem or whatnot, but it's just like, I don't know, think about maybe who could relate to you, right? You got at least a handful of guys or more that you could hit them and be like, hey man, how are you dealing with this shit? Cause I just can't get past this part. Like, what are you doing? And everybody processes it and thinks about things differently. That's why mental health is such a very broad um spectrum. I mean, and some people, certain situations, it doesn't phase them as much as others, or, and I don't want to use that word because that sounds like, somebody's weak. I don't think that there's any weaknesses. It's just finding the ways to get you where you need to be. It's a different recipe for everyone.
It
Um,
is. It's definitely a different recipe. And one thing to think about too, there's something called complex PTSD. And what that means is you experience PTSD as a child or trauma as a child, whatever that might be. And then you experience it again as an adult. Let's say you're in the infantry in the army and you experience PTSD in Iraq. So when you have that, and that's where it doesn't mean that you're weaker. It just means that you've put more miles on your psychological car that driving through your brain, right? Like there, it's just that you might have experienced complex PTSD, and a lot of people who join the military, come from broken homes or trying to get out of town, whatever it might be. There's a better opportunity, GI Bill, you name it. You guys all know the reasons, and that could be it. Now, that doesn't mean that if you didn't experience trauma as a child and then you join the military and you struggle with mental health, it doesn't mean that you're exempt. It just means that that is part of the reason why I think some people go darker really quick. It's because they've already experienced trauma, and then it just got a little bit more complex by experiencing it again as an adult.
yeah, wow, that's good information. I wasn't aware of that. I mean, honestly, but it makes complete sense, especially knowing a lot of the guys that we do. They didn't. There's probably a big chance that a lot of that happened.
Yeah.
That's what.
Absolutely. Like I think we used to always joke around in the SEAL teams. I'm sure it's the same way in the Marine Corps that like who has a family that's still together? It's like every single person, came from a broken home, or not every single, that's being super dramatic, but I don't know. I'm not even going to throw a percentage at it, but it felt like the majority of everyone came from a broken home. And that's, I don't know how, like I said, I don't have the statistics on hand, but it just felt that way.
No, that would be interesting to find out though, because you got to think, especially guys that join service to go and be the most elite of the elite as far as what the U.S. military can offer. Like that stems from somewhere. Like there's preparation, there's mental preparation and toughness that already has to be there, and physical preparation and toughness that has to be there. And as a kid growing up, what not, I don't want to say better thing, but what thing could push you towards that, already
Right.
going through trauma or going through situations that somebody at that age, shouldn't have to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the group called Adult Children of Alcoholics. Have you guys ever heard of that? It's like AA. Essentially, it is from the same, I guess. Yeah, like AA. What that means is, as a child, you had a parent that was an alcoholic, and that shaped the way that you actually you present yourself as an adult. And what I mean by that is you're always striving for, like, goals that are over the top. Now, don't get me wrong, some people are goal driven, whatever, but in my opinion, from my own experience, because I'm a child of I belong to that category, an adult child of alcoholic, that you're always striving at the detriment of all sorts of things, personal issues, whatever, to strive to get these goals. And it all goes back to trying to, as a child, trying to get attention from an adult. So you're like, let's say you're in the Marines and you want to be a squad leader, like you are just want to be so hard. And then all of a sudden you want to be a platoon sergeant. And then all of a sudden, it just keeps going. It never ends. And the military provides, it provides an avenue, like, where there's tons of goals that you can make. It's endless if you want it. And I think a lot of guys go in there and they come from that background and they keep striving. Now, don't get me wrong. Some guys might be hearing this, be like, yeah, whatever. I had a successful tour, and that's true. That is totally true. However, maybe a little self-reflection on that, and checking out, you can Google Adult Children of Alcoholics. And I'm not saying everybody needs to go to a meeting, just like an AA meeting. I'm not saying that, but it is just, if you're a student of your own mental health, it might be something just to be aware of just like, why am I acting that way? Why do I always why am I a workaholic? Why am I doing this or that? And some of it, for me, finding out the why that I act the way I do truly helps. Where it's like, even when I was in my darkest, deepest hole, it would be like, okay, what is the why? Why am I here? Well, I'm here because of, complex PTSD. I'm here because of all my tours. I'm here because I'm drinking too much. And okay, like that helps me. It doesn't make it better, but it helps me realize, okay, like there's a why behind it. Now let me try to pull myself out of it.
Yeah.
Alex, have you heard of resilience or ACEs? Or
Yes, like an A score. Yeah,
yeah.
I have.
So this is the work, right? This is like some of
Yeah.
the work that I do with like youth development, stuff like that. There's a documentary, I don't know if you've seen it, it's called Resilience, the Science of Hope and the Biology of Stress. And it has to deal with the early studies of ACEs. And for those who don't know what ACEs is, it's adverse childhood effects. They recently changed that, I think in 2019, they call it PACEs.
Hmm.
And I forgot the entire acronym, but essentially they put in the positive aspects of PACEs. So, right, we can't really empirically like say, oh, this is what's going to make a person resilient, right? Like the more issues they have growing up, or the higher the ACE score is, they're going to be this much more resilient. Well, there's like, it goes back to like, it doesn't matter what environment you come from, there are certain types of factors that contribute to someone being resilient. What they are, we don't know, but we do realize that over long periods of time, that your ACE score, right? And ACEs falls between um, early interactions with like your parents or your environment or people in your family, whether it was substance use, whether it was emotional abuse, psychological abuse, or sexual trauma. We realize that while we might not remember those things when they happen, the body does remember, and it
Hmm.
comes back in ways probably when you're exhibiting some type of, stress response, or that acute stress thing that happens after a combat tour, where it begins to have a multi-tiered effect. And what we think we're dealing with, whether like for me, just dealing with, the loss of a friend, right? What I think I'm dealing with isn't really just the loss of a friend. It's like you said, that complex thing of how many people down the line weren't there or were there. And then all of a sudden, as a result of whether it was substance use or just them having no coping skills, ended up leaving. And then as a result of it, this whole experience is like force multiplied.
Right.
Um, and I encourage, people who haven't looked into it, look into the documentary. And it's fascinating how they came about it. They were doing studies with people who were who were obese. And what they found was that the people were losing the weight. They were losing hundreds of pounds, but then all of a sudden, they would quit the program.
Hmm.
And during a series of assessments, they were asking a series of questions, and one of the doctors ended up making a mistake, and the woman who was on the other end started crying, and she started basically detailing how she had this horrific experience of sexual abuse. And it turned out that a large majority of the cases of obesity or overweight issues stemmed from sexual abuse as a child or at some point in time. And so, I mean, it all makes sense to see how one evolves with respect to uh, compounding traumas or compounding stressful situations and moments.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one thing that really struck me while you were talking was the mind body connection, and I think that that is so important for people to realize. You're essentially, you can have trauma and it can manifest itself in cirrhosis, headaches. It can, all fibromyalgia. There's all sorts of things that can happen, and as almost a student of your own body, that's something to pay attention to. And also, you can't, if you experience that trauma, the body keeps the score. So at some point, that trauma will come out. There's this really great book called "What It's Like to Go to War" by a guy named Karl Marlantes, and he's for you guys, a Marine. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. It's thought of as one of the best books about the Vietnam experience for a soldier or Marine out there. Anyway, Marlantes, he left. He was a Navy Cross recipient in Vietnam. War hero. He gets out of the Marine Corps, and he's an Oxford scholar, a super successful businessman. Everything's going great, right? He's making a ton of money. Everything's happening. Then 20 years into it, his body kept the score and it manifested itself again. And he felt, he just really struggled, went down a deep, dark hole, and it just took him years to get out of it. And that's why he wrote that book. And it's just, I guess, the way I say that is sometimes talent, if you're a person who has some talent, or, you might be your own worst enemy, because your rock bottom might take you 20 years. It could take you 30 years. It could take you 1 year. You could be a super talented person and it could take you no time at all. But it's just as an example where it's like, you have to deal with what happened to you in the Marine Corps or as a kid or both. You have to deal with it, because if you don't, your body it'll express it years later. It's not going anywhere. You have to deal with it. And that's where even talks like this or reaching out to an old friend or whatever it is a great first step.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always talk about like my experiences, I know that it's changed me, obviously changed me as a person. But there's certain aspects of that I'm grateful for. We're not talking about, somebody that's struggling having to go in and just completely try to erase their identity or what they connect with or how they connect to things and people. Like, you know, um, yeah, just like I said, I'm grateful for how, a lot of the things that it made me become. Certain things where I can kind of realize where I'm coming up short at, I need to work on, and I try to do that myself. But that's why I, was bringing up the point that some people just don't have that tool set to be able to, try to tinker on things with themselves, or
For sure.
completely, like, just strip your whole life down and then say, all right, I'm doing this for 60 days, 90 days. I'm going to try this, see how it resets me up here. That's hard. It's challenging, but, yeah, you don't need to forget who you are, where you came from, or what you experienced. You just need to find a way to do it in a more, healthy way.
Right.
So
No, you're so right. And it's, how can you expect someone if they're in the throes of depression or PTSD or both, which is so common, and they're, maybe they're drinking too much and they're at their house and they're truly struggling. I can't expect them to all of a sudden one day just be like, okay, I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to go to yoga. I'm going to join this men's group. I'm going to start reading all these
right.
books. I'm going to start reading all these books. I'm going to start training for a marathon. And, my wife's going to love me now, even though she hates me right now. Like, it's like, because I've been an asshole. So it's kind of like, it is, that's what I say. You just have to make it to that next meal, or just get one win. Just, in sports, just get on the board. If you're behind, sometimes the hardest thing is just to score like a field goal. Just get on the board. And that might be a goal of, going to the grocery store, or,
Yeah.
it could be, okay, I will go to I'll go to lunch with an old veteran buddy, and I think that's so true, because let's face it, the humor that went on in the military is not acceptable in the civilian world.
Yeah.
Right? Like that dark humor, you can't just drop. Like, there's been so many times when one of my first jobs, and I was working in more in corporate America, and after I got out of the military, and I would drop a joke which was like, let's say PG-13 at best in the military, maybe, and people would look at me like sideways, and then all of a sudden I'm thinking like HR, human resources, not to be confused with hostage rescue, would be like looking at me like kind of awkward, like, so it's just, it is, you need that, because it is funny, and it is something that's ingrained in all of us, and that will be, and that's one thing though, when in humor, that then you feel alienated where people don't get me. So it's so important,
Yeah.
just to link up with that old friend, or it could even be somebody you've never even deployed with, but if there's someone in your neighborhood or whatever, grab a cup of coffee with a guy who used to be in the military, like he'll get it or she'll get it.
Yeah. Once you find that connection, you're like, oh, the gate's open, and then you can,
Yeah.
just let it all out. But, no, and peeling back a little bit of what you were saying, I'm not a super, like, I won't say I'm not goal oriented as a person, but, it's those small wins, like you were talking about, get those good hits going on, no matter
Yeah.
what it is, how insignificant you think it is. Like, I'm a guy where if I have, if I have a day off or something and there's things that I want to do, I'll make a checklist on my phone in the notes app and make the little bubbles next to each one of them. And as I do them, I tap that shit. You know what I mean? And it makes me feel good. And it could just be mowing the grass, or doing, something that's really not a big deal, but knowing that I'm being productive and doing something does something for me up here.
Yes.
And I know it does. And that's a big thing. That's a big concern with me with like social media. Is a lot of youth especially goes to social media to get that, you
Mhm.
know, and that's not real.
Mhm.
That's artificial. It's made up, you know, and there's nothing against people who enjoy video games, but they're getting that from a video game, which is not real productivity in real life. Um, and I'm not saying, you know, I know most of us grew up in a different time before technology was like this and we had to play outside and that's how we got our enjoyment. So it's a little bit easier for us, you know, as well into adulthood to know how to utilize those things to get, you know, personal benefit from, but they don't know that. And it's a concerning thing. I know Jose, you know, is really big into this and with the youth and making sure these kids have these means to, you know, better themselves outside of technology, because that's just not, in the long run, that's not going to play well for mental health.
Yeah, good point. I mean, you know, we're humans. We should have human contact. That's just the way our DNA is. And one thing that really struck me, Polly, that you said was making that list. And I think you're so spot on with that. I do a similar thing. I go way old school by writing it down on a pad of paper, but I should probably up my game a bit. But, you know, one thing to think about with major depressive disorder and PTSD is a byproduct of that, or a symptom, is that, you know, you have like fog of memory and fog, you know, like everything. So if you just get something down and you just check that box, even if it's like something as simple as, I don't know, cleaning your car, you know, just check the box. You know, going to the grocery store, check the box, whatever it is.
Yep.
You know, that is huge. And you might not think, you might like, oh, I'm a grown ass man, I don't need to do X, Y, and Z. Well, yeah, you might not, but also all these little things, these little hacks, if you will, are going to really help you when you're struggling, when you're at your lowest point. And it's like, well, I've got 3 things I need to work on. Let me just once again get on the board. You know, let me get a hit. Let me get on base. Just something for today. I got one win. And I think that is really important. And I certainly use that. And I would recommend people that are struggling with mental health, journal, you know, make those checklists, whatever it takes. As Jose was saying, you know, it seemed like you were getting a lot of obviously benefit out of writing. And you don't have to be a professional writer or someone who's looking to write a book. It could just be whatever's on your mind. Nobody ever has to read it. You just write it down. You get it out of your brain. You get it on there. And hopefully that will help impact your mental health. And that might help, like for surfing, for me, it might be what is Jose like writing for you. And then it might be art for someone else. It just depends on if you find that one thing, especially in a flow state, which we can get into if you guys want, but that's so important.
No,
Yeah, for
absolutely.
sure.
Yeah. So farming, sustainability,
Yes.
man. So like I've created these mental places, like I hate, this is gonna sound kind of worky, but safe spaces in my head, right? One of them is me being in the field. It's blazing hot. I have a hoe and I'm just tilling the ground. Just me. That's like a place that I go because I've done it so much, but that's where, like, that's the flow that I love to get into. And then there's the other flow too, where it's like I'm researching and I'm just in the zone, man. And
Yes.
and that's so hard to achieve, especially whenever I've had so in 2019 I went through a really bad funk, so all that stuff finally caught up to me, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh damn. Eventually, 2 of my buddies ended up dragging me to a VA hospital, you know, to get checked out. And it's not that I didn't have the skill sets or anything. I completely ignored it because when I was in the operational tempo, I was contracting and I was like in that state of mind. But the body can only run off of adrenaline and, you know, that stuff for so long. So eventually I ended up, you know, getting the help that I needed. But one of the crappy parts about it was that fogginess ended up taking over. And it's like, I went through like periods, like months and months of writer's block, and
Mm.
it was tearing me apart. And you know, that's one of the good things about microdosing is that it has allowed me to kind of like gain back that flow, but either typically through strenuous activities like farming, PTing,
Mhm.
I can gain that sense of flow. And I'm sure you have a more poetic and academic approach to it, and I would love to hear it.
Yeah, no, I don't know if it's better. I thought you did great. I would say for people who don't know, you know, flow state is everything that you were saying, Jose. there's nothing else that's going on but what's happening in that moment. So it could be, working in your garden. It could be playing a guitar, surfing a wave, skiing a slope, whatever it might be, fly fishing. And what I mean by flow also is, depression hangs out in the past, things you wish you could have done, things that you experienced, things that could have happened, just, survivor's guilt, all these things, it's hanging out in the past and you're ruminating about it. And anxiety hangs out in the future, things that that are coming up that you hope can get done. I don't know if I'm good enough, this or that, I'm just stressing about the future. What is so special about a flow state activity, writing, surfing, gardening, you name it, it keeps you in the present. And so if I'll just use surfing as an example. So if you surf a wave, maybe the ride on that wave is, let's say 5 seconds, maybe a really long wave, 8-10 seconds, but let's just say 5 seconds. For 5 seconds, you've actually given your sympathetic nervous system a break. You've just paused it. Now, 5 seconds might not be that big of a deal, right? But then if you catch 10 waves, then you're talking, that's maybe a little bit more. But then you get into the routine if you're doing that 3-4 times a week, and then you do that over a course of time. And if you're patient with yourself and you keep going with it, that actually will help impact your mental health. Same with anything, I just use surfing as an example, but anything in flow state is so important in my opinion. And I would recommend any of those veterans out there that don't even know where to start, or maybe you're like, I don't feel like going to the VA, or yeah, I've got my buddy, yeah, we hang out, every now and then, and that's kind of cool, but what's the next step? It could be finding a flow. Like I play guitar, what, let me just force myself, set an alarm on your phone for, let's say 2 p.m. every day. I'll play 30 minutes of my guitar, even though I feel like I can't, or I don't want to, or I'll make an excuse not to. If you just adhere to that, if you do it for 30 days, that's actually what they say is like a habit forming. If you can do something for 30 days or get out of a bad habit, it takes 30 days. If you can do that, in my opinion, you'll positively impact your mental health. And that could be something that gets you on the board, that gets you going in the right direction.
Yeah, I don't know how, I wish I could figure out myself enough to know how to tap into it, but I've definitely been, just doing like projects. I'm big, I've talked a lot about it before on here. I'm big into like creating things like woodworking, metalworking.
Awesome.
I have a shop, and I just love that because it just lets my mind be creative, and it doesn't really matter what I come up with. But I love when I tap into that flow state where it's just like everything's clicking, no matter what, like every move you're making is just precise and it's right. And there's no real thought going into it. It's just happening. And, I've done it, just doing things in the yard too, where you're just like, you're making shit happen with like, it seems like minimal effort. And it's just like, why am I just so on right now? But, yeah, if no one's ever experienced that, find something that will make you experience that. Like you said, and it's those hobby things, those passions that you just, I think will spark that in you. You just got to find something you really enjoy doing. And most people have a stressful life, where they got to go work and they got to go do all these routine things, but you have to find something outside of that, whether it's just going on a run or doing, whatever. So speaking of flow state, I've never been an individual, and I did a little bit of reading, that has jumped out of an airplane before. And I know you have. Am I accurate in saying were you a jump master?
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I actually saw a photo with you, and I wanted to ask a question.
Sure.
What is it like? I don't know if it was a team member that was in the photo with you. One of you guys had a dog strapped to you. And I've seen pictures of this before, and I always wondered what that's like. Not just jumping, but jumping with this dog on your body.
Sure. Yeah, no, it was interesting. I was a free fall jump master. I was also a tandem master, and what we would jump our military working dogs. And it was always interesting because in the beginning, it was a long phase. I was part of a unit that was developing this concept. and developing, now you look at it, they've got, great bags for the dogs to go in. But in the beginning, we were like, you don't even want to know what we were trying just to make it happen. It was like research and development. And so to answer your question, you all dogs, especially military working dogs, they're badass, right? They're total, like they will fight to the death, and they have. But the thing is, you get them in a weird circumstance where now you're on an airplane, it's cold. Now we had a muzzle with oxygen that we, doggy oxygen, now you're jumping them at night, you're doing hay-hos, which is high altitude, high opening. So you're opening your parachute very high to fly long distances in a stack. But it was hard because these dogs, some of them would be fine with it. Some of them would freak out. Some of them their anal glands would secrete, and get all over your gear. And now you're like, and you can't get it out. So it's like, you're ruining parachutes, you're ruining gear, let alone the guy that's covered in it. So it was always a challenge. And also the safety when you jump a dog, they're moving around. It's not as bad, not as, I guess, dynamic as jumping a person, especially with, the military takes the fun out of everything. So, they strap on rucksacks to both the jump master and the guy you're jumping, and guns and nods and all these things. So it was so much fun helping develop some of these concepts. And it was so cool seeing some of these dogs, especially the ones that were unfazed, like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, you want to do it? I don't care. As long as you throw me a ball at the end of it, I'm good, bro. Yeah. Like, when are we going back overseas to bite some bad guys? And yeah, so I love those dogs, and it was just such a cool experience, working, jumping them, and just going through those motions.
Yeah, I'm sure that was awesome. I just saw that picture. I was like, holy shit. I've seen those photos before, and I was just like, obviously we need to bring these dogs with us. They, play a critical role, but I'm like, who does this? Who actually gets to do this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
oh man, we were so ghetto in the beginning. We would have, like kit bags, what I mean? Like they're like a bag that you like, it's almost like another form of like a duffel bag, but it's just, we took those and we created these harnesses for these dogs in a airloft. So looking back and seeing what they're doing now, it's night and day. So what I was doing was very ghetto compared to what, how high speed the
right. They got these custom made doggy bags where you put the dog in.
Exactly. All the young guys are like, this is how it's always been. Like, you don't even know what it is. It's like, never mind. I don't want to be that guy. That's just the old dude like saying, like, you don't know how lucky you have it.
Back in my day.
Yeah, totally.
Oh man, I bet you've seen some crazy evolutions in tactic strategies and just gear.
Absolutely. When we first started, when I was fortunate enough to be on the Afghan invasion, I didn't even have a sight. I had iron sights on my gun. I had a PEC 2, laser on my M4. But and here's the thing: when we were doing mechanized reconnaissance. My platoon was below Kandahar. So as the Northern Alliance and the ODAs were pushing through, essentially fighting the whole war, we were just trying to get involved. We were in these mechanized like hide sites trying to call in airstrikes on the Taliban. And but before we went out to do that, I remember my platoon chief came to me, was like, all right, you're one of the drivers of the Humvees. And I was like, great. And he's like, yeah, have you ever driven on night vision? And I was like, I've never driven on it. And the majority of us hadn't, just to be honest. This is 2001. So we were driving around laps around Camp Rhino with the Marines were there. And we were just driving around, just trying to get as many laps, as many reps as possible in hours under, not even hours, like minutes under NOS before we actually went out. So from, night vision to gear to technologies. I was fortunate to be a part of, at least see a lot of that, and in unit effectiveness, targeting bad guys, all sorts of different things. But it was a very, I feel fortunate to be a part of that generation, our generation.
Yeah, totally. For sure. I was actually thinking about that last night, just as far as technology and our war fighting capabilities, how the leaps and bounds that have been made since, even just since Vietnam to now, the end of our war, you have these precision guided fires, all these, thermal and night vision optics. And it's just like, what made me think just how weird that is that if we do end up in a conflict in the future that does require some type of ground element, you realistically have, outside of the SF community, you have about 3 years to train up whichever individuals you're going to be sending as your main element on this particular set of gear that's available at the time. You know, like you said, you went in with no real optic. You had iron sights on your rifle. Up at the end of your career, you probably had, unbelievable things you could throw on that,
Right.
But as far as a main element, if you have a main ground force, you have a very small window to train them on whatever the best gear available is at that time. And it's just, I don't know, the evolution and the progression of how it's pretty amazing, honestly, that we can continue to keep coming up with things that make us better as, as a military as a whole. But you have a small time to teach people how to use that and use it effectively.
You're right. Yeah, it's the innovation over those years was groundbreaking, of course, and you're right. Getting the gear to the right people. I remember I was also fortunate enough to be on the Iraq invasion, and I remember right before we went in, we were with the Indiana National Guard, and I'll never forget these guys are straight up National Guard. So they're whatever jobs in Indiana, just doing their thing. They get called up, and then now they're in Kuwait at Al Salim Air Base with us. And they don't have body armor, period. They had Vietnam flak vests and they didn't have armored vehicles. And so thankfully they had some skilled welders and they were welding, plates of steel on the side of their vehicles. And those guys straight up were maybe not at like like with the Marines at the tip of the spear, but they were certainly rolling through and took a lot of casualties and were fighting. And you're right, because thinking we've come a long way since then. And I didn't mean to get too far off topic, but it is, at the end of the day, I look up to those guys, and I, fortunate enough to have, the training and the gear, all of these things. And here, these poor guys were like school teachers, mechanics, whatever, whoever they were in Indiana, and they were throwing on the American flag on their shoulder and just not going in with the gear they needed. And they were fighting just as hard as anyone else. So shout out to the Indiana National Guard.
Citizen soldiers, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nuts. I couldn't imagine doing that. I could not.
Well, I remember even seeing them and being mad as an American, as a taxpayer, and just being like, are you kidding me? We can't get these guys the basics, like, body armor. But, that was a different time. And hopefully we've learned, I've actually seen a lot of National Guard units since then, and they look pretty well equipped. So hopefully things changed. It seems like they have.
Oh, yeah. We had the opportunity to speak with retired Major General John Gronsky. And he was with the Pennsylvania National Guard, and those guys evolved as well. They were mainly in the fight in Ramadi back in what was it, like 06, 05, 06? Yeah, 05, 06.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah. But yeah, they've come a long ways, and that was just 05, 06 time frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nuts, man. So man, you did 2 invasions.
Yeah, it was weird. it was weird. It's just like, this is how it goes, I guess. I felt super fortunate to do that, and that the fervor in America was so different than it obviously is now, as you guys can remember, where it was just by chance that I was able to do that. It wasn't like, all right, let's pick a hand-picked team. We need Alex West. It was more of like, I was just a lucky guy that happened to fall in the right place at the right time. And, and it was exciting, it was stressful, working up to both of those, but it was, especially the Afghan one. I felt very fortunate to be on that, because even though we had such a small part to do with it, especially compared to the ODAs, those were the true heroes of that invasion. So we were just a small spoke in the wheel, but it just felt good to be one of the few guys that was on the ground when it happened, even though we didn't do much.
No, that's amazing, dude. The government got their money back out of you, it seems like. pushing.
they got it back from all of us, man.
Yeah.
They definitely got their money's worth out of all of us.
I was listening to Jocko speak with General Baldock. I don't know if you're familiar with General Baldock. I think he was a major at the time, but he was one of the I don't want to get it wrong, but I probably will. But I think he was like a BC. Like he was just running operations with like the ODA guys early on in the invasion, and man, the challenges that they face in terms just of moving forward, I couldn't imagine. I mean, we kind of got a taste of that with Operation Kanjar back when President Obama did the surge in '09.
Yeah.
We had that opportunity to do some of that work, and yeah, that was tough. That was
Yeah.
tough. At least dealing with the heat. I can't imagine dealing with all that in a short time frame, and then yeah, on horseback and whatnot.
Yeah, no, what I think was so impressive with those guys is just the creativity, just to make it happen. It just was, hats off to those guys. I mean, that's truly thinking outside the box of, that's exactly what those guys are designed for. So I'm sure, and those guys that were part of that are kind of legends within that community. And I mean, any community really, but certainly they deserve it because they really thought outside the box and made it happen. And look how successful. I mean, obviously now we look back on it and the whole Afghanistan, everybody's got their opinion, but at that time, those guys, I mean, hats off to them. Just hopping in there, just, hey, just get creative and take this Northern Alliance and win this whole war in like a month. And they did. So it's amazing.
Yeah, I would like to hear if you're willing to go there, man. Just your thoughts on Afghanistan. It doesn't have to be negative or positive. Uh, just want to know what your perspective.
Sure. Afghanistan, I struggled probably like most vets. I struggled when, we were shocked, obviously, by how fast the Taliban took over. And I was struggling in the beginning, just like, was it worth it? Which I didn't feel like it was, what this, I mean, all of the lost guys and, guys that got injured and all of that and time, money, effort, wasted. And then I was actually speaking with my therapist and she just dropped a knowledge bomb on me that made sense to me, at least. And was, Alex, you guys went over there and deployed and fought the Taliban and Al Qaeda in the beginning. And has there been a terrorist attack on American soil since then? And I thought, well, I mean, it depends on your definition. She's like, well, that originated from Afghanistan. Has there been a terrorist attack? And I said, no, that there hasn't. She's like, so it was worth it. So for those 20 years, it wasn't for naught that you guys actually did make a difference. And then she pushed it back on me. It was like, do you think it would have happened again if it wasn't for you guys? Another style, maybe not as dramatic as September 11th, but something that could have certainly killed Americans. Do you think that would have happened? And I had to honestly think and be like, yeah, it probably would have. At least the chances would have been very high for it to happen again. So that's helped me. That doesn't make everything go away but it has lessened the blow a little bit. And certainly like a lot of us, I certainly feel for all of the Afghans that helped us, whether they were working in the galley all the way to being on the front line interpreter or soldier. It's it is a very sad thing, but that's helped me kind of get through it. And a lot of friends that I talk to are really struggling. I try to express that, that there hasn't been attack in the last 20 years. And that's, I don't know, that's kind of where I'm at. How about you guys?
Yeah, I kind of feel really very similar to what you just said. And another thing I've been thinking about, and I haven't really shared it. Um, a lot of people say, you can't change those people. And I know anyone that's dealt with, Afghanis or whatnot, they're very cultural, obviously. And I think a lot of us kind of felt that early on, like we can't, no matter what we do, no matter how we try to train their army or police or anyone, when we're not here, they will fall apart just like they did, like no surprise. But what I think about is, for the 20 years that war went on, I know there were, especially in the regions where there was a lot of, you know, conflict going on, a lot of fighting. Outside of those, you had children who were born 2001, 20
Mhm.
years old, and they grew up in a country completely different than if we wouldn't have been there, right? Because the Taliban would have been running their game, doing their, fear and intimidation tactics on whoever they wanted to try and get things to go the way they wanted. So, especially in the bigger cities, the more, Kabul and Kandahar and all those places that are a little more westernized, you have kids that grew up without this fear of the Taliban coming in and, doing whatever they wanted. And I know that did still happen in areas, but I'm just saying for the most part, how do we impact their lives? So now you have an adult that grew up completely different than they would have if we weren't there. So, what good can they do now? What changes can they make now for themselves and their country moving forward? I know there's a big hurdle there to get over as far as, the Taliban goes and those, just crazy ideologies, but you have a whole country full of adults that grew up basically with the war going on, but basically with a lot more freedoms than they wouldn't have had if we weren't there. So
Yeah. No, makes sense. How about you, Jose? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think I don't want to go on a rant here, but I think what got me the most was I couldn't get my kit and just go there. I did some work in Kabul between 2017 and 2018 working for Academy. And that's a challenging place to operate in. And there was a level of investment that was highly tied with, our fallen. And I just wanted to fight. That's all I wanted to do. Right. That was like, and I couldn't like yell. I couldn't say, fuck, I didn't have, I couldn't scream outside my barracks door. This platform is kind of what I had. So that's kind of where the tension came from. And, seeing all those guys on the ground over there, you just couldn't be a part of that. And you wanted to. And one thing I was proud of was we had, there's a SARC, a Special Amphibious Reconnaissance Corpsman that was with the Unit 28. And he was down there and we were coordinating, trying to get some of these people out. And right before the Abbey Gate blew up, the family almost got out. They're still over there, and I'm still contacting the State Department, still contacting the White House, all these people to try to get some real time information where the checkpoints are in case they have to move out of Kabul. But he was coordinating that. And I thought to myself, here is a group of young men, very few of them remember why they were there in the first place, 9/11, whatnot. But here's a group of men and women that finished the job for us with a level of uncertainty, and they did us proud. And I thought to myself, that's something that I can hold true to. And, Doc was out there and I'm super proud of it. Like, I'm super proud of him. I'm super proud of those young Americans that were out there. And that's kind of what carries me through, is knowing that even though we're not there in those senior positions guiding it, those guys still are. And so that's what I hold true to. And I still get tingly about it. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't until 2019 where I had that breakdown where I started finally feeling a part of, the veteran community, or just the community in general. And I look at my overall life, and the one thing that I haven't failed at yet is I haven't failed my unit. I'm doing whatever I can to try to assist guys that just need the help or just be there. And I haven't, failed as a father yet completely. Right. I still have the struggles that I deal with in terms of understanding, all my previous deployments and just life in general. So, yeah, I'm upset about it because I couldn't fight and just wish I could give that helping hand. And then at the same time, I'm very proud that we finished that mission with all the bad stuff. But nonetheless, the fight still carries on. And this is something that I try not to like bring up, but it's something that's always in the back of my mind. We're in great power competition era, and we know the CCP is in that region. I know what they're there. I know what they're doing. I don't know if all of America does, and so I worry about the strategic locations of what we gave up, what it means for future operations. And I really look at the special operations community and I feel for them in a way, not like pity them, but just we have a kind of bad record now with leaving behind particular groups of people like fighters, and that's going to come back. And so I still kind of worry about that, that kind of aspect. But overall, man, I'm still like, I didn't lose a war. And that's another thing is every military objective we accomplished. The nation building aspect of it, that's a very difficult thing to accomplish. I mean, look at the United States. It's a democracy. It's still an experiment, and we're still overcoming a lot of the things that happen with a democracy. So it's like we can't expect, democracy to take place within a 20-year span. So diplomatically, we need to refocus. And I don't know if I'm anyone to even just claim that, but I think that's in the long term. Diplomatically, I think we need to do a better job in terms of getting control of that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely a lot of hubris thinking that we could change those people. I mean, we certainly tried, and just like in the movie Platoon, at the same time, Charlie Sheen said, nobody wants to be the last guy killed in Vietnam. Same, that's what I thought of when I saw those soldiers and Marines at the Kabul airport. Was like, man, I can't imagine what it must be like to be one of them right now. I mean, they're doing the job, they're doing what they've been told to do, but they're essentially like, hey, we have just quit and can you guys help us out? And I'm sure those guys certainly didn't want to be the last soldier Marine killed in Afghanistan. And but you're right, it is, we, not to sound like a broken record or whatever, but we certainly need to do better. You're right. I mean, Vietnam was, as I mentioned earlier, those I had that veterans group of guys reaching out to me saying like, it's just like Saigon, you're not alone, you're not alone. I mean, think about how heavy that is as a society, that we've done that, to where there's a guy in his 40s is getting reached out to by a guy in his 70s who had a similar experience. And we just, where we, and that goes to show though, the importance of veterans groups, though, if you really think about it, but on a greater scale, what we've been doing and thinking that we could change these people. And I don't know, it's easy to armchair quarterback it. I don't know what the right answer would be. I don't know if anybody did, but certainly the Taliban does have their work cut out for them. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but they're having issues with power grid, basic stuff, power grid issues. They're worried about, food shortages, and there's all sorts of stuff happening that they're probably gonna, and they have a whole, as you were alluding to, Paulie, like there's a whole generation of young fighting age men who were brought up where it's more democratic, quote unquote, maybe not like the US, but in an Afghanistan form of democracy, they were brought up to where they could shave their beard. They did have sisters that went to school. They were able, there's more jobs there available. Like the job market, I'm sure, is going to go way down there. So it's the Taliban have their work cut out for them, but that doesn't take away from the tragedy of Afghanistan, sadly.
No, for sure. And like you said, I was going to bring that point up, how those Vietnam veterans connected with you. That's how I felt watching that unfold. I felt like I broke down, and I'm just like, they didn't ask for this. And I know if you're serving in the military, like, at the drop of a dime, you could go anywhere in the world and be asked to do any job, but not being selfish about it. That wasn't their war. That was our war. They were just cleaning it up for us. And I just kept thinking, and we've talked about on here about it, I just kept thinking about all the time that we had, we're GWAT babies. We joined during a time of war, got out, war was still going on, right? And we had so much time in the missions that we were asked to do to try and get this right. They had maybe a couple days on a ship, the Marines anyway. I know they probably flew the Army boys in, but like anyone that went there had a very small period of time to try and start spinning this up, to form a plan, to say, okay, how is this potentially going to play out? Like, what's the mission? What are we going to be asked to do? They had very little time. So I worry about moving forward. Like, I just wanted to hug those guys, dude. Any of those guys that were there, because I felt that connection, but I also was worried about them because I'm worried about them moving forward. They didn't have time to try and set up those mental defenses, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to, I feel very bad for them as far as the preparation time they have, but I know that's just kind of how it goes sometimes, but I hope those guys are really being screened and looked at, and I hope they don't lie on any of their post-action reports about shit like we all did so we could stay in. But
yeah, that's a good point.
yeah, I hope they get the care they need, because, and several guys have brought up the point, like what those guys and girls that were there witnessed in that short period of time was more than most dudes did on multiple deployments,
Sure.
So yeah, hats off to them and getting it done the way they did. I hate we lost even more there, but I think we all kind of, just seeing it unfold that way. I was like pacing around in my kitchen. I'm just like, it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time before somebody pulls up at that gate or
Yeah.
one of the gates. We know their tactics. So, yeah, but yeah,
Sad.
it is
No,
sad. I just kind of, I'm kind of glad it's done and over with, and we don't got to keep losing any more to that war anyway. But
Gray zone challenges are very unique to the Western mindset. This is one of the key talking points that I'm going over. I do a presentation next week, and a lot of folks don't realize that. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Gray Zone report that USOCOM put out in 2015. It just basically was an assessment of the past 100 years of warfare, and they found that for every major armed conflict, so there was 5 of them, there was an increase in gray zone challenges. And so they did a track record, and they found that we had like 12 wins, 9 losses, and 43 ties. Those 43 ties were incidences like Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. And there's a lot of strategists that talk about how the Westphalian state of things is falling apart. It has fallen apart, the international order. Dr. David Kilcullen talks about how peacetime adaptations and wartime adaptations, essentially how he wrote a book called The Dragons and the Snakes, how the rest learned to fight the West. And essentially non-state actors have, learned to use conventional methods, and nation states have learned to use non-state actor techniques and strategies. And, Crimea, Ukraine, Syria, weaponizing refugees, basically deconstructing what's left of the infrastructure in Europe, causing Brexit. The social media influence operations that are taking place today, what the IRA did in sowing division and nearly usurping the presidential elections, what China's doing right now in terms of, everything from data to medicine. It's the world has changed. And what do you do with that? What do you do with what Sean McFate would call durable disorder? We merely contain issues rather than solve them. And so this is the challenge. And to me personally, I believe that, and this is just my opinion, but I believe that the future of war is mental health. If they take the cognitive space, then they take us, and they can't. And that's why it's important that we have individuals like yourself that do the work with One More Wave. Individuals like a good Marine brother of mine that's in Fayetteville area, who does the Soldier to Agriculture program, and all the thousands of nonprofits out there that are doing the work, impacting the community, impacting, the state of mind, and just carrying on with American traditions and ideals. So once again, it's just that's where kind of I'm at and how we feel we should go. I think this is a good segue to how do people get in contact with One More Wave? How does that process go?
Sure. So you can go to our website at onemorewave.com. And if you're a veteran looking to get involved to join one of our chapters, you can just go apply. And then when you apply, just say that, hey, I want to be a part of a chapter. If you need surfing equipment, that's when you go to that same application, and then you just fill out all of your stuff. And for One More Wave, we don't require that you were, GWAT or that you were wounded or anything like that. All that we require is that you have a VA disability rating of 0. So that all we need is just, a DD 214. Just to, believe it or not, people have tried to scam us in the past who weren't veterans, but so we just have to do a little bit of vetting, no big deal, follow-up call. And that's how you can find us. You can also find us on social media at all the handles, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. It's the number 1M Wave, and you can find us on there also. And that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of us. Also, if you want to email us, admin@warmerwave.com.
Nice. I
Awesome, man.
I was listening to one of your interviews, and it struck me that you guys work with guys with other than honorable discharges.
Yes.
And I commend you for that, man, because there's some boys that did the work, and as a result of leadership issues, the way that they got kicked out or just left the Marine Corps wasn't the right way to go about it. And it's been a challenge to get those guys to kind of go through that review and change that, just so they can get the honorable status, because they are. I mean, these guys got medals, man.
Yeah.
And yeah. So
No.
can you talk
Yeah,
about that
no,
a little bit?
yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, if we didn't accept veterans that had dishonorable or other than honorable, we are truly turning our backs on our veterans. You know what I mean? Like, in my opinion, I mean, like, who would we be as a nonprofit if we say we help veterans, if we don't help the whole population? Because I believe that a lot of those veterans that have those, there's a stigma towards them, or maybe in their own minds there's a stigma, but that, they got kicked out because they were quote unquote bad, or an issue, or, popped on a drug test, whatever. Well, the thing is, they might have had those issues because of what they experienced in the military. They could have had a traumatic brain injury by hitting an IED in Ramadi or whatever. And then that led to, crazy mood shifts, and, ultra aggressive behavior, drinking too much to numb their own pain. And the next thing you know, they're in a bar fight and whatever, they're booted. Then now they don't get any VA benefits at all. So the VA essentially has turned their back on them. The GI Bill, all these different VA home loans, all of these things have turned their back on them. And then you want to talk about feeling alienated if you're one of those guys where you're not part of the tribe, quote unquote, but you are part of the tribe. At least at One More Wave, you are always part of the tribe. We will never turn our back on any veteran. We've even had veterans that were a handful to deal with, to say the least. But that really comes back to their mental health. That's all that I have to think of, or we as an organization have to think of, is this is not who this person was before they joined the military. They are certainly struggling. Yeah, they're kind of hard to work with, quote unquote, but they're worth it. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that they're taken care of, and that they are part of our tribe, because without it, think about where they would be. And that's when it's just horrible. And I don't even want to know where they would be without, without that. And I would encourage other nonprofits to take that stance, because they are worth it. And there might be a reason why they are struggling, and that they're expressing their emotions like that. It's because of stuff that they experienced in the military.
Yeah, man, thank you for doing that. I used to work back in the day at what they called a wet shelter. It was like a homeless shelter, but it was all for men. And one of the shittiest things was, you get guys that did time in service and left, with an OTH or dishonorable, and there was nothing that we could do, like in terms of like getting like certain grants and applications, getting housing situated, and it's just, I couldn't do anything. And it's just like, all we could do is, allow them to stay at the shelter from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and then tell them to go on their merry way, and then come back again at night. And yeah, it was just a shitty thing, man.
Yeah. That's more common than not, especially when you get into grants. And you sometimes, for those that don't know, you become, if you accept a large federal grant or a big grant, maybe it's a private grant, you have to adhere to the laws, or the protocol that organization wants you to have. And that's probably where that came from. If I had to guess, it was a government grant, and they were like, they can't accept, help from the government because they have an other than honorable discharge. Well, as you're alluding to, Jose, and as I'm saying, that's not on my watch, man. Like, we'll figure it out. If we have to sling t-shirts out of the back of a truck to figure it out, if I have to talk to people, because all you have to do is, if you just talk to these veterans and you just ask them their story, 9 times out of 10, it's just like, damn, dude, like we cannot turn our back on you. And that's no knock on the organization you're volunteering for, Jose. It sounds like they were probably handcuffed, because at the end of the day, nonprofit or not, like, everything runs with money. Let's just be real. Like, I could be a social justice warrior and be like, all cool, like everything. But it's like, at the end of the day, you got to pay the bills. You got to keep things going. You got to keep kicking the can down the road. However, And I think that's where smaller nonprofits can really make an impact. I think when you guys, Polly, or maybe it was you, Jose, alluding to your friend in Fayetteville with that veterans with agriculture, like small stuff like that. I'm not saying they're small, but I just mean like where the smaller you are, the more you can make an impact, in my opinion. The more say that you can have, the more of like, you know what, screw it. Like, we're not going to do that. One of our first veterans to was this guy named Chris Small, who was a Marine, and he had lost his leg to a car wreck in Okinawa in the 90s. And I remember, and I was surfing with him a ton. I met him through that surf clinic at the Naval Hospital, and he was so fired up. You could tell he just changed whenever he surfed. Awesome guy. And I went up to him. I was like, "Hey, Chris, you're going to be the first recipient of one of our grants." And he just shook his head and just looked down. He's like, I don't deserve it. And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "Well, I'm not a wounded warrior. I lost my leg in a car wreck." And then I just thought at that moment, like, fuck that. I don't care. Like we're going to take care of you, because, whether it's other than honorable discharge, there's other people that got hurt in the military also that they feel like there's a stigma, like, I'm not a combat guy, or I'm not a GWAT guy. But it's, at the end of the day, if you signed up to go, he didn't, he was in a car wreck. It wasn't even a drunk driver. It was just a straight up car wreck, deployed, lost his leg. And there is a lot of people like that too, that don't even have the bad marks of, or not bad marks, the controversial marks of other than honorable discharge and all of that. So I think, if kind of on my soapbox here, but there is, for the smaller nonprofit is, the more they can make those decisions of like, nope, you're part of us, bring it on in, because they're not beholden to that large grant. Not to get into like nonprofit policies and all that.
No, I appreciate you doing that, because you never know who might listen to any of these, and if they're interested in maybe starting something or doing something, those are all great points that most people wouldn't know. So.
And also, for if a veteran's out there struggling, and if they are one of those vets that have, other than honorable, and if you're not getting any luck with the big nonprofits, chances are, don't give up, man. Just, make it to that next meal, like reach out to another, like a smaller nonprofit. There's a lot of nonprofits out there for veterans. Let's be real. But sometimes you may find, don't give up on the big ones. There might be some smaller ones or medium-sized ones that can really, help you out.
Yeah, that's awesome. So before we wrap it up here, be honest.
Okay.
Rate yourself as a surfer.
Oh man, I am a total hobbyist. Let's be real. I'm a total hobbyist. And that's what's funny. People always think, that I'm like some shredder out there.
You're like, man, you're spending a lot of time in the water, man. You gotta be good.
Well, I don't know. I'm a hobbyist. I'm okay. If it's too big, I'm probably not going out. Like they say, the best surfer is the one having the most fun. So I would say, out of a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, I'm probably like a 4, maybe a 5 at my peak. But
that's good.
But I do have the network of friends who are incredible surfers that give incredible surfing lessons. So that's probably my biggest strength is my network, not so much my own personal surfing skills.
Good stuff, man.
Right on.
Well, Alex, we appreciate you coming on and chatting with us. I enjoyed it, and you're doing great stuff. OneMoreWave.com if you guys want to check them out. So
no, thank you guys so much for having me on. It's great to talk to some fellow veterans, especially like-minded guys that want to try to impact our community. And it's guys like us, in my opinion, we're just chipping away at it, trying to get the word out to veterans, especially with mental health. Jose, I think you're so spot on with, that's like the next frontier, like mental health. And if you're a veteran out there who's struggling, or you're someone who knows a veteran that's struggling, reach out to us at OneMoreWave.com, as Paulie said. But even if you're not a surfer, we're connected with so many different nonprofits, from fly fishing to extreme sports, or whatever you want to call it. We might know somebody that we can help plug you in, because most importantly, you might not think it right now, but you definitely fucking deserve it. You deserve to have a happy, healthy life. And, I don't want to speak for you guys, but it sounds like all of us on this call believe that. And we know that it's just get on the board, just make it to that next meal, just get some points on the board, get a small win. And before you know it, it might sound impossible, but you'll start making progress. So thank you guys so much for having me on.
Awesome words, man. Appreciate that. Take care.
Take care.